Well, good morning, good morning. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan. This is episode 13, and this is kind of a different episode because I was researching the United Auto Workers Union, and there were some things that kind of took me aback with it, and I have tried to record this 3 times, and I'm kind of disappointed in what I'm seeing in unions at this point, because let me put it this way, I didn't sleep well with this on my mind, and I thought I knew a lot about unions when I started this podcast. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast, was because I really wanted to focus on the good things about unions and workers' rights, and that's why I call it the endurance of labor laws, because we do have labor laws in the United States. And my original thinking of unions was very positive. And the more I research these unions, the more concerned I get. And one of the things that really bothered me about the United Auto Workers Union is that they were infiltrated by communists back in the day, and they actually allowed some communist members to get into positions of leadership, kind of take over different locals, and cause a lot of problems. But this union, they also utilized these communist members to grow in power. So even though this union tried to say they were anti-communism, because there was an anti-communism thinking back in the 40s and 50s, because we were coming out of World War II after 1945, and the United States was very much against communism because we knew about some things that were going on in the USSR at that time. But there were also a lot of things that we were not made aware of until the Soviet Union fell and basically got restructured as a country and became Russia. And we realized that there were a lot of bad things that were going on within communism and also within communist China. But however, this union, they claimed to be anti-communist, but yet they were allowing members that were pro-communism to kind of do their thing because they wanted more money and more power. And they were becoming more and more extreme left-wing liberal within their unions, and they were starting to funnel more money to the Democratic Party. And that really shocked me. Then later on, when researching about the United Auto Workers Union, I had completely forgotten about the bailout. Now, mind you, I think that was between 2008 and 2010 when a lot of the financial crisis within the auto industry hit the fan back then. So, let's see, I graduated high school in 2002, so 2008 I would have been 24 years old. So I was not really aware of a bunch of union details in my 20s. And also because Oklahoma is an at-will state. So there were a lot of things that I did not know or understand about the auto industry in unions back in my 20s. And this is just stuff that I've learned over the years. But I do remember that I did not agree with the federal government bailing out the automakers, because most of the time, when you have a company that is failing, it is not the responsibility of the federal government to use our tax dollars, meaning my wages and your wages that are taken out of our paychecks that get sent to the federal government to be allotted out to different social welfare programs. It's not appropriate for the federal government to use our tax dollars to bail out any company when they are in financial distress, when they created their own mess. And the United Auto Workers Union and the auto industry, they created their own mess. They can try and blame it on the financial crisis, banks, other countries, fuel, oil, gas, whatever. They can use all these excuses. But, when you own a company and when you're part of an organization, you have two things that you really have to put at the forefront. That's accountability and responsibility. And neither one of those things were being taken seriously by the auto industry or the United Auto Workers Union. And they had not been taking good care of their industry for many decades. So another thing that came out with the financial crisis within the auto industry was that the reason why they were hemorrhaging money was because they were overpaying their workers. Their workers in the auto industry, they were making almost $70 an hour. Now that includes their pension benefits and their health care benefits, but still $70 an hour. Now I work in accounting and I've also worked as an auditor. $70 an hour is equivalent to a little over $145,000 a year gross income. That in Oklahoma, that is what a general practitioner who is a medical doctor would make. So you've got these auto workers making the same money as a medical doctor, but yet have never been to medical school. That is a big problem. And the reason why is because that creates inflation within that industry. That's why they were having a financial crisis within the auto industry, is they were over bargaining. They were basically being gluttons off of salary and pensions because what they were wanting was not realistic. Unfortunately, with this particular union, which is very disappointing to me, what they did was to grow, to grow their numbers. Instead of just being auto workers, they expanded their umbrella to include other industries, and they kind of took over other unions, which that disturbs me with that because that's forming a monopoly. Monopolies are illegal in the United States, but the way these unions are getting away with it is they're organizing. They're organizing their unions. I think that is very much wrong. I think it's good to have a union, but when you're taking over other unions and you're giving them your name and it's United Auto Workers, but yet you've got people that are not auto workers within your union, then how do I say this? It tells me that there's something else going on. And with this particular union, they took over several other different unions. I think it was like aerospace, I think higher education. They were trying to grow their numbers because they had quite a few people that were retiring. So their active members, those numbers were low. And I think the numbers they had 390 active members, I think, as of 2013 or 2015. 390,000 active members. But they had a little over 600,000 retired members. That is a big problem. And here's why. A lot of these members, a lot of these retired members of this union were still expecting to get paid their wages even though they were retired. And they were getting paid their wages up to 95% of their gross income. That is a huge problem. That's not just a benefits package. That is really too extreme because in no other industry that I'm aware of does that happen for when you retire. I don't even think they get those kind of payments from the state or the federal government when you retire. I've never heard of that, and it's completely unrealistic. So if you have more people that are taking money out of the system than putting money into the system, that's where you get inflation within your industry. And you really go into the red in terms of financial crisis within your company, within your union, and within your industry. So automakers, they knew that what was going on was not sustainable, but yet they continued to do it. And this went over several decades. And I believe this union was founded in 1935, if I'm not mistaken. But it's one of those things that even from the beginning, it just looks like they were not realistic about what they wanted. Like I would love to have a yacht, a luxury yacht, and maybe someday I will. But, it's one of those things you can want and dream something, but you have to be realistic about your situation, and whatever you want or desire has to be appropriate. Like I would love nothing more than to have multiple houses located all over the world in different countries, luxury homes, have a yacht, have all this beautiful luxury. But if it's not sustainable and if it's not realistic for my personal situation, because at this point in my life, I'm not a millionaire or a billionaire or a trillionaire. I pray that someday I become one. I would love that. But if I am expecting everybody to meet my needs at a millionaire, billionaire, or trillionaire income level, but yet I'm not there yet, then it's very unrealistic and wrong to expect other people to try and meet my needs at an unrealistic level that doesn't exist yet. I hope that makes sense, but that's what it's like. So basically this union in this industry of the auto industry, they basically had champagne taste on a beer budget. That to me is very disturbing. Because first of all, if you're not realistic about wages, then you're not realistic about the economy. And if you're not realistic about the economy, then you're not realistic about your industry. If you're not realistic about your industry, you are putting your company and or your union in jeopardy of failing. And if those things fail, then you are risking everybody that works in that industry and everyone that is in a union within that industry, you are risking them losing everything. And I think this auto industry knew that, and I think this union knew that. So I think they were trying to get as much money, squeeze as much money out of this before the bottom fell out. And then when the bottom did fall out, they went to the federal government, which is technically you and me, the citizens of the United States. They basically come to us and say, gimme, 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 we want more. Oops, we made a mistake, now we've got to file bankruptcy. I personally don't care. When someone needs to file bankruptcy, they've got a bigger problem than just filing bankruptcy. And I know this from working in accounting and from being a business consultant and from working as an auditor. So that's why my eyebrows really raised a lot when reading about this union. Like my eyebrows were so high on my forehead, the muscles were tense, that now I feel like I need to get Botox. That's how shocking this was about this union. It really was disturbing, especially with their connection with communism. Because communism has no place in the free market. But this union and this industry, it's like they were trying to have it all on both sides. You can't have communism and have democracy. You cannot have communism and have a free market. You cannot have communism and claim to promote freedom. Because communism is the opposite of everything that the United States stands for. Those are just the facts. I don't know how else to make it clear with that, but it just really shocked me. And I'm surprised that this just kind of fell through the cracks in terms of people waking up to the dangers of this. And I say that because, there were some workers within this union and within the auto industry that, they basically got to go to the trough whenever they wanted. If they're getting paid $70 an hour, that's almost like what a low-paying psychiatrist makes. And again, they've never been to medical school. Like, your wages need to match your industry standard. That's what I was talking about in a previous podcast, where if you want to make more money, go for it. I say double and triple your income. But you need to do it appropriately. And it's based on your skill sets and what you want in your life. It is not based on how much you can squeeze out of your employer. And if you don't get what you want, picket them, have a sit-down strike, and throw a hissy fit. That's what this looks like with this union. And they threw what I call hissy fits They threw these hissy fit sit-down strikes almost from the beginning, back in the 30s and 40s. And I just think that is just completely unrealistic. Because also what you have to remember is that the automobile was considered a luxury item back in the day. And this is before a lot of our interstate highways were built. So the fact that these workers were wanting so much money and all these unrealistic things from the very beginning tells me they were just having their head in the sand and expecting everybody to pamper them and meet all of their needs that were completely unrealistic, and not paying attention to how everybody else is living in the United States, and take into consideration that the average automobile back then in the 30s and 40s was not affordable by the average American. So if the average American cannot afford something, then you cannot expect to make lots of income off of a product that's not easily obtainable, if that makes sense. Like you have to be realistic economically speaking. And just the fact that they were not realistic hardly at all, and I don't know if they're even realistic today, but if you're not going to be realistic about your industry, then why are you in business? I look at it this way. Let's say, for example, these higher-ups with these automakers, let's say they are hemorrhaging debt, they have filed Chapter 11, and they don't care to change their policies at all about their pay structure. They think that people that are retired should get paid 95% of their income, which that would be 95% of $145,000 per year per employee that's retired, that is no longer working. Let's say these higher-ups, let's say they go on the TV show Shark Tank, and they want one of those or several of those sharks to invest in their company, but yet their companies are completely failing. They're going to be filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and they have a sourpuss employment atmosphere where if their employees don't get what they want, they walk out or they strike, and they make these unrealistic demands, and it's almost always about money. And then also this industry, they also wanted to try and do the 30-40 rule, which is where you only work 30 hours a week, but you get paid for 40 hours of pay per week. Now just imagine if you're a CEO of one of these automaker companies and you're in that union and you're going to the Shark Tank and you're telling your story to one of these sharks or all of them, do you really think any of those sharks, those professional business people, professional business people who started their own businesses, they employ quite a few people, they understand money, they understand jobs, they help people provide for their families. These people are not morons. They understand things. Can you honestly say any of those sharks in the Shark Tank on that show would invest in any of those automobile industry corporations? Do you really think they would be okay with the average worker, or maybe the majority of the workers, making $145,000 a year in a machinery-type job, when in no other industry are workers paid that much? And their workers want to get paid the equivalent of a doctor, but yet they're not a doctor. And then they don't want to work full-time hours. They want to work part-time, but get paid full-time. And if they don't get their way, they plan on walking out on the job. Do you really think an investor of any kind, but especially the sharks in the Shark Tank, do you really think they're going to be okay with that? Let me be the first to say, no, they would not be okay with that. Because they know that that is not a very well-run company, and they are not going to invest in something that could possibly fail. And if you were to tell them, oh, by the way, we're having to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy, will you invest in us? The smart individual, which all those sharks are very smart, that's why they're successful, they would say, no, we're not going to invest in you because you obviously don't know what you're doing. You're not taking accountability for your finances. Big time. And they would probably ask you, have you ever done an audit? Have you tried to rectify these problems? Like, where is the problem coming from? Because you're bleeding out money somewhere, basically. And what those sharks will know is they will know that you're just looking for money, but you don't care to change. That is a big problem in this union. It's the biggest problem I have seen so far with all the unions that we've looked at. And I remember when this financial crisis within the auto industry hit the fan, my mouth just dropped. I was like, how could so many large companies in the United States be so poorly managed? And how could a union have so much power and just continue to do the wrong thing? When we have democracy, we have the free market. I guarantee you, if I'm not falling for it, the sharks for sure are not going to fall for it. And they're way older than me. I'm 37. I think most of them are in their 50s or 60s now because they've been on TV for a long time. But I mean, it's like if I know that this stuff is not good, I guarantee you investors that are way older than me are not going to fall for this. And they're not going to be for it. I don't know or care how the sharks vote. It has nothing to do with being Democrat or Republican. It's about being professional within your industry. And the United Auto Workers and these auto industry companies are not acting or behaving in a professional way, especially with their own finances, but yet they got a bailout from the federal government, which means you and me, the taxpayer, had to help these people that were living high off the hog. And that's just horrible. See, because our federal tax dollars, now, just as a reminder from previous podcasts, I am not a big fan of social welfare programs. However, if we do have them, which we do, if the federal government makes these promises that they're going to take care of people within those social welfare programs, which would include Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head, then monies should not be allotted to private corporations. Private corporations are on their own. That's the whole point of having the private sector. So for the federal government to give federal tax dollars to private corporations instead of giving them to social welfare programs that we already have in place, I have a big problem with that. Because if the federal government is going to make these promises that they're going to take care of people that are listed and within the social welfare program, then those monies have no place being given to a private corporation that did not and does not care to do the right thing with money. They can't even handle their own money correctly. So why would anybody think that they could handle anybody else's money, much less the taxpayer money? It's ridiculous. Like, my mouth just dropped with this one. And then these memories came back of all these news stories I remember seeing on TV. And I wasn't a huge news watcher back then, and I'm not even now, but I remember this being a big deal in our country because guess what? It was a big deal. The federal government needs to learn to tell people no. That's probably going to shock some people, but the federal government needs to learn to tell private corporations no. If your company is failing, then that's on you. It's not on the federal government. Our tax dollars should not be viewed as a personal piggy bank for these large corporations that do not care to take accountability and responsibility for their actions, whether good or bad. Because I've met people on Social Security, welfare programs, Medicare, Medicaid, disabled veterans. They need more help than these corporate people. And I'm not against corporations. I think corporations are great, but when they start going to the federal government and expecting to get a bailout, I'm like, really? When are you going to put on your adult pants instead of acting like a baby wearing Pampers diapers? And you need to start acting responsible for your financial decisions. That's what an adult does. I'll give an example. Let's say, for example, you and I are in business together. let's say it's a small to medium-sized firm, and let's say it's not going very well, we're spending more than we're taking in, and we're thinking about filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy, but we would prefer to just go to the federal government, stick our hands out and say, give me money. You know, do you really think the federal government is going to give us money when we're just a small fry compared to these huge corporations in the auto industry? No, the federal government is not going to give us a bailout. Because the federal government expects people like you and me, the small guy, the underdog, to figure it out. And if anything, the federal government would think, why are you coming to us when you're responsible for your own company? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Because it's like, you and I would never get a bailout if we were in business together. But these large corporations that are connected to this very powerful union, they get a bailout because they're I don't want to say in cahoots, but they're too connected with the Democratic Party and they have too much power. Because you have to be careful who you are aligning with. And it's very dangerous to get in bed with the federal government. Because once you get in bed with them, they own you. So the auto industry, you know, you're on your own on this one. I mean, I'm very disappointed in this union. And now I understand why so many people that were way older than me at the time, when this hit the fan back in, you know, the late 2000s, now I understand why so many people were upset. Union members and non-union members. People all across the United States, they were not happy about this. You know, I was busy working, like 2 jobs at the time, trying to keep my head above water, trying to earn a living as a really young person in my 20s. And, you know, I didn't really have time to pay attention to this stuff, and I didn't care. But looking back, I kind of wish I had. But I mean, I had a job to do, a non-union job. Like, I had to take care of me. But what's interesting is that these corporations that were mismanaging their own money, you know, because they didn't take care of themselves and they didn't handle things the correct way, they just expected other people to just put money in their accounts, which the federal government ended up doing. And that's not right. You know, our tax dollars are just that. They're our tax dollars, meaning they belong to you and me as citizens of the United States. It doesn't matter what party you're in. Because taxes are taxes. Revenue gets taxed equally. And if it's not being taxed equally, then we got a bigger problem than we realize. But we'll get to that, I guess, later in time. But, you know, everybody should pay tax and pay the appropriate tax. My personal opinion on taxes is that the tax rate should not be any higher than 10% on all income. Because I think if you're going over 10%, you've got mismanagement of money within the federal government. Big time. And you've got too many social welfare programs that are not being managed correctly. And they're not balancing their budgets. Because it's just basic math. It's basic math and arithmetic to balance the budget and figure out what's working and what's not working. You don't wait till you have a financial crisis, and that's what happened in the auto industry. They waited until they had to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Like, I don't think people understand that, you know, a financial crisis doesn't just happen overnight. It brews and accumulates over time. So the people, the higher ups, these executives within the auto industry and these unions that are under this one union, they just turned a blind eye to a lot of stuff, and they just wanted to continue their high-paying jobs, but not taking into account the economy and what people can purchase and what they cannot purchase. And, you know, they were not being realistic about their situation. And this happened for many years. So they really have no one to blame but themselves on that. And you know what's interesting is that, you know, how do I word this? The larger you grow in your company, or the bigger your company gets, or the bigger your organization gets, the more responsibility you're going to have on your shoulders, and you've got to be able to handle it. And if you can't handle it, you need to find good people, good advisors that can help you handle it. And to me, it looks like this union did not go to the right people to help them. And these automakers did not get the right people to help them. That is very much disappointing because how hard is it to put the word out that you need an advisor? Like, just consult with a basic business consultant or get an auditor. And that's another thing. Like, nowhere with these unions so far that I've seen does it state that they have an annual audit. I've been to their websites. I've looked them up in different research projects online. And you know what? If you want a really good company, you want to be successful at what you do, smart people and responsible people, they have two things they do every year, if not twice a year. They have an internal audit and an external audit. Because you want to know what's really going on in your company. I mean, you can love people, you can trust people, that's great. But you kind of need to have the mentality of what President Reagan had with these things, and it's trust but verify. You can trust people all day, but if you don't verify the numbers, you've got a big problem, and that's where a lot of fraud happens. And I know from working in accounting with this, like numbers are numbers, it's basic. You either have the right numbers or you don't. And if you don't have the right numbers, then you investigate, why are these numbers not correct? Why are we constantly in the red? Where is the money going? Why is there mismanagement? And if there are bad people in your organization, guess what? You fire them. It's simple. It's very simple. Like, that's what you do when you have a business, and that's what you do when you have a union. And what I'm noticing with these unions, I can't really find one as of yet that has been run well from the beginning and that hasn't been riddled with scandals. I mean, scandals happen, but it just seems like they're not learning from the problems that they've had. They're not changing their ways. They keep getting these bad people in positions of power. Some of them are communists. Some of them are fascists. And, you know, that's just not a good way to handle anything. You don't ever put bad people in charge and you don't give them access to your organization. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. I would think that would be obvious. Like, power-hungry people are not the most loyal, and they are not the most trustworthy. Because they're only hungry for power. They're not hungry to do the right thing. They're hungry for selfish reasons, and usually for greed. See, money is not the root of all evil. It's the love of money that is the root of all evil. And it seems to me, from what I've read so far, and I'm very disappointed by this, it just seems like there's a lot of greed and mismanagement in these unions. So, I'm not really sure. That's why I didn't sleep very well when I was researching this stuff, because I really tried to focus on something positive, which is what I always try and do when I'm researching something, have an open mind and find something positive. But I'm just not, at this point, as pro-union as I used to be, because I literally did not know a lot of this stuff, because my impression and what I thought of a union was, oh, they're pro-workers' rights, and I'm thinking at it from a point of view of my own personal experience, where I've had some really tough jobs, I've had some very unpleasant work environments, and there were times I thought, man, if I was in a union, maybe that stuff wouldn't have happened. But then, now that I'm researching unions, I was researching it from a point of view of being positive about workers' rights. But what I didn't know was all this other stuff that's attached to these unions. And a lot of the stuff that is attached to these unions, I do not agree with. It's not right. I have a problem with it, is what I guess what I'm trying to say. And so what I'm learning about myself at the age of 37 is I'm not as pro-union as I thought I was. I'm very much pro-workers' rights, and I believe in the law, but I don't believe in manipulating the law. I don't believe in corruption. I don't believe in just letting people get away with financial scandals or any kind of scandal. I don't believe in turning a blind eye. I don't believe in bailouts of any kind. I could care less if people lose a bunch of jobs with that. The federal government is not a personal piggy bank. Like, I don't view the federal government as my own personal piggy bank. even though I pay taxes, it's not my personal piggy bank. Those monies are used for all citizens in the United States, not just the few. And when I'm learning about unions, and I didn't realize this with unions, is that the reason why they're donating millions of dollars, which again I completely disagree with because that's misappropriation of funds, I don't agree with these unions giving to the Democratic Party because they're just using our federal government. They're just trying to get the federal government to be in their back pocket. Well, that's not appropriate. The federal government does not belong to the few. It belongs to all of us in the United States. If you're a citizen of the United States, you are the federal government because you are a tax-paying citizen. Even if you're trying to avoid paying taxes, which I would encourage you not to do that because you will get caught. But my point is this. Our country is a good country. And I'm not seeing as many good things about unions as I thought I would see. Like my endeavor with this podcast was to present the facts, but I was kind of looking more towards the good things of unions, to really focus on workers' rights and having a good workplace and things like that. And, it just seems like there's scandal at every turn. And it almost always has to do with money, and it's almost always had to do with it going to the Democratic Party. And then a lot of times you're dealing with a Democratic Party that now they've got this leftist liberal agenda that is not American. It's not what America stands for. Because if America had been founded on leftist, liberal, radical theologies, we would have never become a country. Because the reason why we were founded, well, one reason, but there's several, but one reason we were founded was because a lot of people left Europe because they did not like the tyrannicalness of their monarchies and they did not like the governments that they were experiencing back in their homeland. And some of these people escaped persecution and execution. That's why they came here to the United States. And at that time, we were not the United States yet. We weren't even a country yet when the majority of these people came over to, I guess, North America, you could say, because we had colonies. They wanted something new. They didn't like the tyrannicalness of the current government, which most of them were monarchies at the time. Most of them, not all of them. But it just seems like with the leftist liberal radicalness right now, and even going back to the 1930s, it's not what you think it is. And that's very disappointing me because it's like I really wanted unions to look good. I don't know how else to describe it. But, I reached out to a couple different unions. I was like, hey, I'd love to interview you on my show, my podcast. I'd like to hear more about your union, the good things that you're doing. Not a single one of them has responded back to me. They don't want to be interviewed. And then there was one website, I'm not going to say which one, I went to their website and they were saying horrible, hateful things about scabs. And initially I was like, what's a scab? Isn't that sad? I don't know what a scab is. But I didn't have the full interpretation of what it meant. Like when I initially saw the word scab, and they were saying really mean things about it, I was like, are they referring to someone with a medical condition? Because when I think of a scab, I think of something medical with your skin, because that's where some of my knowledge comes from. But then I was like, I should probably know what that word means. But a scab is someone, in terms of unions, a scab is someone that is doing the job of a union member because the union has gone on strike, so the employer has hired these non-union people to do the job that's not getting done. Well, I don't blame the employer for doing that because the employer is trying to stay in business. That's one thing I don't understand about unions. I'm kind of taken aback by this. It's like my mindset has been changing with this because I cannot deny these disturbing facts with these unions and what they've been doing and what they are doing and their behavior problem that they have with money and political power. But, in terms of the employer, an employer has every right to have people do the job and get the work done because they're trying to stay in business. See, what unions don't understand is that the place of business does not belong to the union. It belongs to the business owner. And these unions, it's like they're trying to take over these industries. Well, that's not right. It's one thing to want better jobs, better wages, but that doesn't mean that the company belongs to the union. And so these unions have gotten really hateful and mean to temporary workers, to people that the employer hires so that way they can keep their doors open and create revenue. They're acting horrible and hateful to these temporary workers that are having to do their job that they are refusing to do. I find that very disturbing. Because I think it's wrong to call someone a scab, because you know who those people are? They are your fellow American. They're your neighbor. They might be the person that goes to church with you. I mean, they might be the person that you are sitting next to on a flight. They might be the person that you're standing next to in the grocery line. And yet the union is calling them a scab. They're no different than you or me trying to earn a living to provide for their families. I think there's way too much hate in these unions. And I saw it on one of these websites, like my mouth dropped. And I was like, I kind of feel like I'm diving into something that I thought I knew what it was, but I'm learning I did not really know what unions are or what they were. And it really has me concerned. Because I'm like, I look at things from an accounting point of view and an auditor point of view, because my brain, the way it works, it runs like a ticket tape. And I'm used to working, especially as an auditor. When I go into a situation for a place of business, to me the word audit doesn't scare me, because I've worked as an auditor. I'm just looking at the facts, trying to find the problems, and then help the company or whoever correct them, get things be on the up and up, so that way you don't have the same problem again. Well, the way my brain works is it runs like a ticket tape. So it works really fast, really quick. And so when I clicked on this link to go to this website of this one particular union, not the UAW, but a different one, I was shocked at the hate that was on this website. And it was geared at people that they call scabs. And I just thought, how could anybody be for such a hateful organization? Like, just to have that kind of hatred towards your fellow man or woman. I just don't get it. And I think it's wrong. Because, if you put the shoe on the other foot, what if I had that kind of hate for someone that was in a union? It wouldn't be right. We're not supposed to hate each other. We're actually supposed to love each other. I am a Christian, and so my faith tells me I owe no man nothing but to love him. And within that love is kindness, dignity, and respect towards your fellow man. And when I say your fellow man, that means man, woman, or child. It basically means the entire human race. So just because I have a personal agenda or something that I really believe in, that doesn't give me permission to be hateful to anyone. If anything, it's my responsibility to practice that due diligence and practice goodness and kindness all the days of my life. And I'm noticing the more I research these unions, there's not a whole lot of kindness associated with them. They are being tyrannical, unrealistic. They are riddled with problems and scandals. And, ordinarily, because I'm used to working as an auditor, so scandals don't surprise me. That's one thing you learn when you work as an auditor is you don't react emotionally to scandals. You just go, okay, you have these options to address this. You just treat it matter of fact. Well, that's how I was looking at all this. Okay, they've had a scandal here and there. What did they do to rectify it? And what I'm learning is that they don't really care to learn from their mistakes, these unions. All they care to do is to accumulate more local unions, put them under a national umbrella, and then just transfer the union membership dues or fees wherever they want instead of keeping those monies local and instead of helping out in their community. Well, where I come from, that's called misappropriation of funds. And that's a big red flag. Financially speaking, and from an auditor point of view, from an accounting point of view, the phrase, you follow the money, I mean, if you follow the money with these organizations, it's almost like they're just collecting all these monies just to give to the Democratic Party. And there are good people in the Democratic Party, but it just seems like the only reason why they're donating to the Democratic Party is so that they can use the Democratic Party at their will and at their bidding. The Democratic Party does not belong to the unions. The Democratic Party belongs to the people of this country. Like, I could care less how someone else votes. I'm just glad that people vote. Like, whenever we have elections, this is a side note, whenever we have elections, whether state, local, or at a national level, I always look and see, okay, what's the population density of the area and how many within that population voted? I like to look at the stats. And I really love to see, regardless of how the election turned out, I mean, we always want our person to win, but more importantly, what I look at is how many people actually did the right thing and got out and voted. Actually let their voice be heard, because regardless of whether they agree with me or not, it's important that everybody's voice be heard as a citizen of the United States and that you get out and vote. And what disappoints me is when people don't exercise that right, because that's a freedom that did cost people their lives back in the day, and it's still costing people their lives this day, because we still have to fight for our freedom. So don't throw that freedom away. And I feel like these unions, they're just using the Democratic Party as their own personal platform, and that's not what our parties are for. Like, I wouldn't be okay with a union donating millions of dollars to the Republican Party just so they can try and manipulate our legislation and get certain laws passed. Like, that's not right. Even if they were pro-Republican, I'd be like, who are you to think that you can try and run our party? Like, I'm not persuaded by money. Maybe I'm different than a lot of people, but you can't buy me. I don't sell out for anything. Nothing. Like, my integrity is not for sale. And it seems to me like the Democratic Party over the years has been cowering, if that's the right word, and whimpering to these unions that have gotten so powerful. And I think that's wrong. It's not right. And I personally find it disturbing because, I mean, I've met some really kind people in both political parties in the United States, and I would not want either one to be taken over by an industry and to think that they can just buy somebody's vote and try and purchase power. That's what it bugs me. When these unions are donating millions of dollars to a political party, they're just trying to purchase power. Well, I'm sorry. The United States is not for sale. Our democracy is not for sale. Our freedom is not for sale. Our integrity is not for sale. That's what this has kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. I'm still pro workers' rights, but at this point, I'm not really sure where I'm going to go with these podcasts in terms of looking at these unions. And that very much disappoints me because I really had to wrestle with this, because initially I was just going to do my usual kind of podcast where I just go over the history of the union. But I'm one of those people that I listen to my conscience. I don't know how many other people do that these days, considering what I've read, but I just couldn't in good faith continue to say that I'm pro-union. Because when I look at it from a legal perspective and from a moral perspective, I just can't really say I'm pro-union anymore. And I'm surprised to say that in myself, because I really thought I knew and understood unions when I started this podcast. I really did. But I realized that I was very ignorant and uneducated, and I did not know the facts. And I'm the kind of woman that I do not deny the facts. I don't ever stick my head in the sand. Because if you stick your head in the sand and if you deny the facts and you don't want to look at what is blatantly right in front of you, then you've basically sold out your integrity. And I'm not that kind of woman. I wasn't raised that way. And I live my life in a very upright, moral manner, and for good reason. And it's because of the faith that I practice, but also I believe in the United States and I believe in our society. and I believe in doing the right thing. Like even when, I've always been a Christian, but even when I wasn't really sure about my faith and, what particular form of Christianity I wanted to practice, even when I wasn't going to church when I was younger, in my 20s, I didn't go very much, I still knew right from wrong. I didn't just take a break from morals and values just because I wasn't going to church. Even back then, I didn't sell out my integrity, and I just feel like if I continue to promote unions, but yet I see the problems with them, then I'm selling out my integrity and I'm not standing up for what's right, because my God and my country come before my own personal agenda. And I feel like with these unions, they're putting themselves first, they're not putting God first, and they're not putting their country first. And even if they don't believe in God, they're still not putting their country first. Which tells me they don't really care about their neighbor. They don't care about other people outside their union. They don't really care about other people that work in other industries. And that's a very selfish and cruel way to view society and to live that way. Because my work is just as important as anybody else's. But I don't view my labor as more important than somebody else's. Like, I don't put myself on a pedestal. But it seems like these unions, they put themselves on a pedestal, and then when something bad happens, they say, oh, woe is me, look at us, we're always the victim. Actually, they're not. Like, if something's not going right in the workplace, in the workforce, more than likely it's affecting the entire country. So it's not just the few that are being affected, it's actually the majority. But yet, these unions, they're acting like, because they're the few, that they're more important than everybody else's labor and everybody else's workplace and everybody else's wages. I mean, who wouldn't want to make $70 an hour? That's an awesome goal. I say go for it. But if it's not realistic within your industry, and if it's not sustainable and affordable, then you've got to find a way to make it realistic, to make it sustainable, and to have it be a positive, worthwhile investment that pays for itself. But if it can't pay for itself, then it's not doable. And if it's not doable, then it's not the right investment for you, for your company, or your country. That's my point. And I'm speaking from an accounting point of view, from a legal point of view, like obeying the laws, and I'm looking at it from an auditor point of view. Because it really bothered me what I was reading with this one. That's why I didn't sleep well. I haven't slept well for like 3 nights because of this. And I had to pray about it. I really did. And for those that don't pray, Christians, we pray. At least they should pray. If they don't, then they're kind of missing out on a very important part of talking to God. But it really bothered me because my original intention of creating this podcast was to really promote unions, because I believe in unions. And now I'm not so sure anymore. I can't say I'm pro-union anymore. And that's one of the things that really bothered me. Because I thought I knew what they were. I thought I knew what their intentions were. I thought I knew, but I did not. And I learned something about myself. I realized that I was very ignorant and that I did not know what I was talking about. I did not really know what I believed in. Like, you can have this kind of, what's it called? Looking at something through rose-tinted glasses. But I'm a very factual person. I'm very factual, right, wrong, yes and no, black and white. I prefer to look at things from a statistical, accounting point of view. I also love medical science. I love science in general. And when something is looking you right in the face and it's not good what you're seeing, you have to call a spade a spade. You have to be honest about it. And if I'm seeing things that just don't add up right, I had to really ask myself, okay, Lesley, if you were an auditor and you were having to research this kind of company in an auditor point of view, what kind of report would you write up about these people or this union or this place of business? Like, look at it from your natural skill set. What would your natural skill set and your integrity tell you about this? And immediately I responded, it's not a good place. They're not doing what they say they're going to do. Their wages are overinflated. They're living well beyond their means. They're not being realistic, and they are manipulating a political party in the United States because they think that political party is in their back pocket, and they could just do whatever they want. That's immediately what came to mind. I was like, well, okay, I just kind of answered my own question with that. But one of the things about being an adult is facing the facts, even if it hurts. Even if you have to change your mind about something, even if you get proved wrong. Like I was totally proved wrong just by researching this stuff on my own. And that's one of the things that bugged me because I thought, well, what am I going to do with my podcast? It's just kind of like, it just takes me aback. But one thing I've learned over the years is to not be scared, to not be fearful, and to just learn. I don't know how else to describe it, but just keep pushing forward and realize that knowledge is power, and it's better to be educated than to be ignorant. And also, you need to be careful who you promote, who you side with, and who you believe in. I'm learning that quite a bit with this project. And I'm learning a lot about our world. Because some of these unions are connected internationally. So it's not just the United States that has these problems with some of these unions. I haven't even looked at all the European unions, like all these unions that are in the UK and some of these other countries. So it's not just affecting the United States with how some of these operate. But needless to say, I learned a lot. There were many things that disappointed me, but at the same time, it reminded me of what I originally stand for, my God and my country. And when I put what's important first, then everything else falls into place and I don't really have to worry about anything. So I'm not really sure what the next podcast is going to be. If this is the last episode of this one, then I guess it's the last one. And I guess I'll focus on something that I know that I can believe in no matter what. So, not really sure where it's going to go from here. But needless to say, every day is a new journey, even if we didn't get what we wanted, even if we learned something new about ourselves, and even if we learned something new about an industry that didn't really seem right, or if it's disappointing. But I will definitely just keep pushing forward, because that's what I always do, even in things that are disappointing. So one of the things I thought of when I was praying about this was maybe I could do a podcast about the Constitution. Because one thing I thought of was most of our workers' rights originate from the Constitution of the founding of this country. That's what makes our country so wonderful and why we have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a perfect description of the United States, because that's basically how we were founded and what people that immigrated here originally, what they wanted. They didn't want any kind of tyranny whatsoever. They wanted true freedom, and they knew it was worth fighting for. So when I prayed about it, because I wrestled with this a lot, I thought, well, maybe I should focus on a faith podcast, or I should focus on my country and the good things about the United States. And how much the United States matters. Because, if we didn't have the United States in this world, I don't know what would have happened with all the wars that we fought in. I mean, just imagine if no Americans were there to help during World War II and World War I and all these other wars. I mean, every country is important, but the United States, there are a lot of times when we get involved in things, we really turn the tide. And it's because we care about humanity and we value human life. And, not only are we fighting for ourselves, but we're fighting for other people that may not be able to fight for themselves. So perhaps I'll focus on the goodness of our country and switch over to focusing on the importance of our Constitution, because that truly is where our workers' rights begins. And it begins in your citizenship and your love for your country. So I'll close as I usually do and say, well, first of all, thank you for joining me on this short-lived journey with this particular kind of podcast. But Also, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, and everything that you do, I pray that you are abundantly blessed and that you're very prosperous and that you do what you love to do. Don't just do something because you feel like you have to do it. Do what you love. And if you do that every day for the rest of your life, you will have tremendous joy, even if you find out things you're not sure about, which just happened to me with going through this. But just know that you can always turn over a new leaf and do something new and great with your life. So don't give up, keep going, and keep striving for the best, because that's where you will find your treasure. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully we will meet again in the future. Bye-bye.